Greetings, watchers of the PG First. Today's video is about my Stormlight Archives fanfiction titled The New Knights Radiant. I make this for entertainment, not for money. All of the characters, places, and plot that you recognize are part of and created by Brandon Sanderson and his team at Tor Books. They own the rights to the original story, characters, plot. The rest of this fan fiction is my own design. So characters you don't recognize, plot differences, all that stuff were created by me. Now let's begin. On the planet Roshar, on the supercontinent of Alethkar, in the Tower City Uritharu, on the floor of the Sadia's household, the story begins. I, Shisha Halmajor, was about to go to the party with my husband, Treln Halmajor, but he ordered me to change into a different Hava before we go to our... Sorry, according to my husband, it's not a party, it's an official dinner with Bright Lord Sadias. I glared at my husband, then went back to change. I walked back with a different blue Hava to put on. My lady-in-waiting, Sosha Kalivamad, combed through my thick brown hair, then she bound it up. She closed the buttons to my left side of my Hava. I chose a smaller necklace that only had 3 emerald bronze. She applied makeup to me. Then I put on my safe hand. So my life has recently changed a lot because, well, the Knights Radiants are back. We're at the fabled Tower City Uritharu, which I didn't know actually existed except in legends. So yeah, it's been pretty weird. So then my handmaid and I went out, went with our guards, and went to dinner. My Spren companion, Dew, suddenly became very energetic as we walked. Shisha, I remember this tower. Could I please take you to the vault? Huh? I said. Well, my former Radiant was the main librarian. And I really want to show you all of the books in the library, please, because I really want to share it with people again, because I liked being a librarian. It was fun. Well, we can, but I would probably have to get my husband's permission to do that, or a more high-ranking person in the tower. But if I can get that permission, then yes. We walked to the feast hall. There we were escorted in to our table. We walked to the brightly lit entrance, and I smelled all of the delicious food and drink. Unfortunately, due to being a woman, I am forbidden from eating spicy food and can only eat sweet food because of my religion as a Vorin. I really did wonder what that more savory food was and how good it tasted. Well, might not ever find out. Anyway, before I sat down, one of our household soldiers pulled a seat out for me. I thanked him and then sat down after he pushed in the chair. But then I decided, you know what? I know my religion forbids me from eating men's food, but I am a Knight's Radiant now, so I just decided to eat some of the men's food. The people nearest to me stopped and looked at me and said, hello. My husband said, what are you doing? Well, I looked at him, just having some dinner, but that's men's food, you can't eat. Okay, well, husband, didn't want to do this in this situation. It's a bit earlier than I wanted to, but okay. I held out my hand. Dew flew to my hand. Mist coalesced into the solid 6-foot-long shard blade. As that happened, my body glowed. My eyes went from green to glowing green eyes, and I stood up straighter. Well, husband, I've had enough of how you've mistreated me all these years, so I am Shisha Hal Major, Knights Radiant in the Order of Edge Dancers, and I am of the third ideal. So, husband, I have decided that I will divorce you. I will have my servants take my stuff away from your tent, and I will find somewhere else to live. So yeah, well, with that said, I released my dew-turned shard blade and went back to eating. Everyone was staring at me. What? And then the conversation resumed as my husband was just staring off into the distance, his head in his hands in confusion. So then, I took my second bite and thought, wow, this savory food is pretty good. So, my husband turned back to his conversation with King Dalinar Colin. I noticed that the captain of his personal guard was glaring at Bright Lord Amaram. His eyes suddenly widened as he seemed to be listening to someone or something. He glanced at my left shoulder, and because behind me my handmaiden was, and then my right shoulder where my friend Dew was sitting. He coughed into his hand and his mouth turned up. I saw the bottom of a sash brand on his forehead. Then I realized, storms. He could only be the courageous soldier that saved Colin, his sons, and the remaining fraction of his forces on the Shattered Plains. The one they called Kaladin Stormblessed. But I started wondering, why does he seem to hate Bright Lord Amaram? My friend Dew whispered into my ear that he is a Knight Radiant and bonded with Silfrina, the Ancient Daughter, one of the first honor spren created by the Stormfather. And from what she observed, he is at least on the third ideal, but he might be on the fourth. I held his gaze, and he nods to me, then he stands back at his earlier position at attention. 5 hours of feasting later, we leave the party and head back to our floor. As I walk through the halls. People are staring at me in shock. And some of my guards bow to me. Lady Radiant. At ease, gentlemen. Because as an edge dancer, I am a knight of the people. So please, I promise you, if any of you are having any problems whatsoever, please come to me. I will do whatever I can to help you deal with them. One of them looked at me, could I talk to you privately? Of course. We went there. I was wondering if I could send a message through the Fabrial to my family back in Kolinar, because since we got to the tower, I rarely had a chance to even send a letter, much less get a span read. Of course. Actually, not while we're at. Do you have a message now? Yes, Lady Radiant. Please, just no need to. But I'm sorry. Okay. We went to one of the span read tables. He looked at the scribe. I have a message I would like to send to Lady Treshev in Kolinar. She nodded, and the span read activated. Hello, honey. I am currently in the city tower of Eurytheru. I call to say I finally got the promotion to Major in Bright Lord Amaram's army. So I will be able to start sending more money to you and our kids. I love you, and I miss you and our kids. I hope to see you again, or at least a letter from you as soon as possible. Okay, I'm finished with the message. The scribe nodded to him. Of course. Major. He then turned to me. Thank you, my lady. I nodded back. We then went back to our rooms, and my handmaid and I now had a new tent to stay in. We need to talk now, Trown demanded. I walked out of the tent to him. He looked at me, shook his head, and grabbed my shoulder very tightly. There is no reason to be polite to the servants, he said. I better not be seeing that behavior repeated, because we are of the third non. Understood? He finished with. I stared him straight into the eyes. Trown, you are a sad man. Then I punched him in the face. Then I used the surge of abrasion to slip out of his grip. Ah! he said after, and put his hand to his face. You just punched me, and I punched him again. Ow. Trown. I will no longer be someone that you can bully whenever you want. 'Cause I am a Knights Radiant. Also, if you try to hurt me or anyone else ever again, even if they're a slave, I will gut you like a fish. He glared at me. Fine. He sneered and growled and stomped off. One of the guards was there. Huh. Okay. I went back to my tent and waited till I was sure he was gone. And then Sosha and I began discussing what times we'd be able to meet with Captain Stormblast. An hour later, we went to sleep after she helped me change into my sleeping wear. I remembered my husband gambled between 4 and 6, so I would try to have a meeting between 1 and 3, as well as hopefully get a meeting with Queen Yasna Kolin. At 3:30, the next day at 3:30, my husband left. 10 minutes later, we walked to the 273rd floor where King Dalinar Kolin and his entourage were living. Guarding the door to their territory was a pair of blue-clad dark eyes and a private second class. The private, I believed, was of the first ideal. The soldier on his left was of the second ideal, while the third soldier was of the third ideal. All three were wind runners. They also had a squad of spearmen that weren't Radiants with them as well. Why are you here, Lady Radiant? He asked. Private Mert, I come to ask Queen Yasna Kolin for a meeting. And I contacted her by span read, and she gave me permission to meet with her. And she said to come at 1:20 and is now 1:18, so I figured it would be better to be a little earlier, so I would like to come in. I quickly responded. There was sound of several people coming close, and we saw Queen Yasna Kolin, her scribe Shallan Devar, and surrounding them was one squad of the Queen's Guard. Please stand aside, Private Mert, Queen Yasna commanded. He bowed and stepped back. She gestured for us to follow her. As we walked down the stairs to the walked up the stairs to the 229th floor, which was where the library was. I turned to the Queen. Thank you, Your Majesty, for giving time for us to meet. Lady Hellmajor, how do you know the way to the library? She asked me. Before I could respond, my cultivation spren named Dew appeared. She bowed to the Queen. Greetings, Queen of Uritharu. And hello again. My friend, she said as she looked to where her companion and spren stood on Queen Yasna's shoulder. During the last 3 desolations, my previous Radiant and I worked at the library. He was a senior librarian, I was his second in command. And I now want to be the librarian to this new generation of Knights Radiance. So please continue following me. We then take a turn left down a corridor. We notice a blackish-clad figure emerge from a crack in a trapdoor. The figure looked at us and then jumped back into the crack. We charged to where it was. Shalyn Devar Colin had her shard blade in her hand and cut through the door. We then proceeded to slowly go through the space and watched as Shalyn Devar began creating illusions. The shadow figure was sending out copies of itself to attack us, while Shalyn's illusions battled with the shadow people. After 5 minutes of fighting, Shalyn's illusions finally won, and she destroyed the shadowy figure we discovered, which was covering a bright crystal column. We touched where we saw diamonds on the wall. These ones were to grab, that we were instructed to grab by Shisha's cultivation friend Do. First recording started, we heard a man's voice say, "Greetings, Knights Radiance. I am Breck, the Master Librarian, and Knight Radiant of the Order of Edge Dancers. Welcome to our headquarters, Uritharu. This is my private domain, the Grand Library. Here you can find memories of what we have recorded. If this is your first time in the library, or if you are a brand new Knights Radiant, please listen carefully. The way the library is organized is by categories. The signs you are looking for will be the different color of gemstones. I'll give you an example of what I mean. The green gemstones contain memories about farming. The red gemstones contain memories of how to rebuild after the desolations. The purple gemstones contain memories of how to read and write. The orange gemstones contain memories of how to get water when there's very little to be found. And finally, the last two gemstones. The yellow gemstones contain the memories about the various history of the various cultures on our world. And the collection of, small bundle that you can see of gemstones contain information about the 10 orders. So, welcome to the library, Radiance, and non-Radiance, and everyone else that has arrived at Uritharu. It is my pleasure to have a new set of people that want to learn. And then the recording ended. It's now been 30 minutes since Shisha left her quarters. I was also learning how the Queen and her ward interacted with their friend, which was kind of interesting. It was much different than how we interacted. Then I looked to Do, who looks mournful. Oh, Breck. It's been hard, all of these ages without you by my side. I miss you, my friend. Well, wherever you are, Breck, whatever afterlife there is, I hope you are in the Aquiline Hills, relaxing and helping people. Well, okay. Well, okay, time to continue working. After this recording was done, we all grabbed various gemstones and began listening to them, as well as my handmaiden and Shalyn, as well as other scribes, were writing down all the information that we were being given. It was really fascinating, but something very disturbing was also heard. At one point in history, the protections of the tower have began to fade. And one of the Radiants suggested we need to get back in contact with the Spren of the tower. The mighty Spren, the third god of this world, named the Sibling. We also learned that they were powered by a combination of stormlight and lifelight and combined and modified to create their own light, which was called by them and their bondsmiths Tower Light. So one thing we did was start to go around the tower and try to contact them, and that we truly do want to help them, but we've never gotten a response yet. But with experiments, well, we didn't know the Sibling noticed, and they started looking for help. We were going to where we learned about where their nodes, which was where you could give power to help with some of our windrunners. One of them, and I, Shisha, went to one of the nodes, touched it, and filled it. Accidentally used all of the lifelight that I had stored in my gemstones, put it in the same node after Windrunner fed it with Stormlight. After we finished, we went back to the tower to continue recording information. And now, to the mind of the Sibling. I started to wake up. Oh my storms. It's the light of my parents. I can feel their lifelight and stormlight entering my system now. Okay. I've not felt this good in so long. I started to mix my mother's lifelight and my father's stormlight. As it mixed and poured all around my body of Eurytheru, I started to wake up. I started to sense that some of my long dormant defenses were finally reactivating. The water that I had used to move all throughout the tower, to water crops, give people water to bathe, give people water to drink, to clean, to cook, was starting to pour throughout all of the internal waterways. I also started to sense something. Oh, storms. That's terrifying. Some protections at my borders that completely blocked intrusion from enemies were unactivated. So I started activating them, and they were working kind of slowly, because I currently do not have a bondsmith, but I cannot trust these humans. From what they did to the other Spren so many millennia ago. Wait a second. That's interesting. They were not demanding I help them? That's odd. Wait, who was the rating that sent me lifelight? Wait. she's the human that's bonded with Dew? Huh. Wow, I have not seen Dew since the last desolation. Wow. Huh. I decided to contact the member of Bridge 4, a very quiet man that I unfortunately forgot his name. So I had him start learning more about Dew's human knight. As I was getting all this information, I learned that she loved to help people, genuinely, and enjoyed helping people. And I thought, maybe I can give some trust to these humans and these new Radiants. Well, maybe I can trust some humans. Not sure about the Radiants, but I do trust Dew. So, oh well. Back at the tent of Shisha Hellmager, she and her handmaiden had returned before her former husband got back. Then went to sleep and dreamed of fighting alongside a stone ward, a light weaver, and a light weaver. The stone ward was a tall, slender man of Vedan descent with brown hair, defined cheekbones, and warmish green eyes. The light weaver was a broad-shouldered, slightly shorter Alethi woman. We were fighting a giant beast that Dew told me was a thunderclast? What? I was attacking its chest, the stone ward was attacking its legs, and the light weaver was causing it to have illusions and fall over. As it was getting attacked, it suddenly stamped its foot into the stone ward, sending him flying into the air. He let out a scream of fear and rage. And I also heard at least 5 curses. But it was also a roar of defiance. Suddenly, a skybreaker flew through the air and caught him. And I thought, a skybreaker? Wait, I thought we only had one skybreaker that helped us. The skybreaker by the name of Zeph, the assassin in white, who was now working for King Dalinar Kholin. Where did we get a second skybreaker? But hours later, I woke up and wrote down everything that happened in my dream. Man, that was quite a weird dream. I pet my Axehound Beam, and learned that we would be having a breakfast with Bright Lord Sadias and his wife again. I got dressed, Dew sat on my shoulder while I started going to the entrance of the tent, sliding on my safe hand. So, me, Sosha, as well as her Spren, Mist, looked around as we went. At the feast hall, we sat next to Bright Lord's. I sat next to Bright Lord Sadias' wife, Ayalaya. I asked how her morning was, and she responded it was fine. She then asked how good of a scribe I was, also if I would like to occasionally work for her. I told her, I will think about your offer. I then looked at Captain Stormblessed to see what made Bright Lord Kholin trade him for another one of Bright Lord and all of Bright Lord Sadias' bridgemen for his shard blade. I thought of how they saved him from the absolute vile betrayal. And I thought, it's incredible. I also decided I wanted to meet Captain Stormblessed. So, I began tapping in code to Queen Yasna, asking her if I can meet with Captain Stormblessed. She inquires why I, a member of Bright Lord Sidious' household, would be even try to meet with Captain Stormblessed. I responded to continue learning about the Order of Windrunners. When she tilted her head to her left slightly, Dew told me she had an inkspren named Ivory. And now on Yasna's left shoulder, Ivory told Yasna, this young radiant is named Shisha Howmajor. She's the former wife of Trell Howmajor. However, she has a handmaiden named Sosha Kalivamad, and she recently filed for divorce for her husband, and unlike her husband, who supports Sadias, she does not. In fact, she often would get into fights with him. She nodded to me. Thank you, Ivory. I tapped back that I would consider asking my husband if Captain Stormblessed would be able to meet with you. Brightness Howmajor nodded in thanks. After that lunch, High Prince Aladar and his retinue left the lunch hall. Then they went to one of the levels and split up, so it was just High Prince Aladar, his scribe, and his bodyguards, the Black Caps. We went to the direction of my Stone Ward squad. I think of some of the future Stone Wards and wonder where he is. Meanwhile, at the camp of High Prince Aladar, I had finally arrived, and I was secretly watching my Stone Ward squad that was on loan to me from the Makabaki government. They were squad of the second, first, third, fourth, second, third, and first and fourth ideals. And the squires were practicing using their powers, fighting each other. They were guarded by the fellow non-radiant soldiers. The newest Stone Ward squire, named Gadol Sakastad, was doing very well in his training, and was likely to become of the first ideal soon. Squire Gadol was climbing on the wall using his surges of adhesion. He could now liquefy the ground as soon as his feet touched it, so his legs didn't hurt from the sudden stop. He was almost instinctively shaping the stone, to my surprise. I had a memory of 3 weeks previously when my men and I of the Makabaki squad were fighting. I saved the 6th Company under Lieutenant Meinel. I next stood and spoke the words, life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. I didn't know it at that time, but I began to glow with stormlight as my brown eyes turned blue. All of a sudden, I heard some mysterious voice say, the words are accepted. Also, I shifted the stone on my feet, which caused 300 of the Parshendi to fall into the ground. I then closed the ground, which used up a lot of energy, but I was also able to currently drawing in a lot of stormlight energy from the various spheres from the other soldiers' gem hearts that they've had in their belts. I raised the Meanwhile, as the sixth company charged forward and began taking out the remaining Parshendi, I raised the ground which obliterated the formation of the Parshendi even more. At the end of the battle, we were swiftly transferred to the shattered plains for how of good force we were, to serve under the Alethi High Prince Aladar. While this was happening, the Skybreakers received misinformation that my squad and I were killed after our army was routed. One of the Skybreakers mistook, and fortunately for us, they believed that absolute nonsense. So anyway, now back to High Prince Aladar. I saw him finish his training that day, then went to get a drink. He suddenly whipped around and stared at me. He saluted. My lord, what are you doing here? And how long have you been watching us, he asked me. And he finished drinking his water. Speaking of which, remember everyone, drink water. It's good for you. Okay, now back to the story. Yeah. Everyone else finished their training that day, and the Knights Radiant of the first ideal brought the raised stone back to how it was before. I said, I'd only watched a few of your training sessions. Excellent job, everyone. We then went back to my quarters. But before we could, one of the scribes told me that Queen Yasna had summoned a meeting of all the High Princes immediately. I nodded to the scribe and thanked her. My guards and I walked to the meeting room. We had a few hour-long meeting, and we ended for lunch. Then I went back to my quarters and napped until dinner. Meanwhile, Knights Radiance. And now, 3 months later, at Uritharu, a pair of guards are walking down the central corridor when a fuse emerges from the floor. It is joined by 3 more. Run, Dirt! The alarm must be sounded! I roared. Dirt nodded, and then charged down the corridor as my shard plate formed and my peak-spread amethyst turned into a glaive. Okay, fused! Take a load of this! Ah! As I charged at them, Amy turned my glaive slashed through the gem heart of 1 fused, then 2 more, then shortened and turned into a quarterstaff, which I clanged into the 4th fuse axe shaft, which I then disarmed the fuse with. Then I smacked his head, bam, and his stomach twice. I rammed with my staff, bam, bam. Oh! He fell over unconsciousness from the force of my blows. Next, I used my quarterstaff as a long pole to launch myself into the air, just as a pair of hands rose from the floor and almost grabbed me. I used my surge of gravitation to stay into the air, because, unfortunately for these guys, I was a windrunner. Then aim turned into a shard bow, so I shot the hands that were coming from the floor, and they jerked back, but because of the arrows through the wrists, they couldn't be pulled back into the ground. Then I heard the stomping boots of one of the patrol squads arriving a few feet away. I held my hand for them to stop, and they did instantly. I then tell them that there are fuse inside the floor, and that if they want to fight, they would need an Edge Dancer, Windrunner, Skybreaker, or Stone Ward, because they are the least likely to be pulled into the ground. Two of the men step forward. We are Stone Wards, and we are pretty good at making platforms for our soldiers to jump across while fighting. I nodded. They then used the surge of cohesion to put their hands into the stone and started raising platforms of various heights all around. According to them later, the stone seemed happy to do so. Meanwhile, the ground traveling fused were forced to rise because of the blood. Their orange blood was dripping. Meanwhile, Dirt had finally arrived at the desk of one of the scribes, panting, "I need to send a message to everyone. This is Dirt, a soldier in Bright Lord Savek's army. The fused have snuck into Eurytheru, and some of them have powers like the Stone Wards, while others have powers like the Windrunners. And even worse, some can throw lightning from their hands." I nodded that my message was over. All around Eurytheru, the soldiers and knights radiants were running to guard important parts of the tower, like the Fabrial hubs and the Oath Gate was located. Unfortunately, and to our horror, half of every knight's radiance in the tower was starting to black out. The unaffected knight's radiance were of the 4th ideal or higher, or they were in the other half of the tower. I heard a large yell, and an extremely muscular Makabaki man flew through the air and killed a pair of fuse with his large two-headed axe. He was clearly having a grand time, flying swiftly through the air like a sky eel. He was expertly deflecting sword strikes with his axe, and a smaller buckler shield was constantly blocking arrow hits. What I would learn was he was a Skybreaker of the 4th ideal. He was also originally a Grand Judge. He called out, and his voice boomed, "I shall carry out the laws when I know they're just." Meanwhile, his body was erupting with storm light. Suddenly, I heard a female voice say, "The words are accepted." I used a surge of gravitation and sucked 5 of the fuse into the ground so they couldn't get up. Then I flew and began attacking Malata, the traitorous Dustbringer Knight's Radiant, while clad in my gravitation spren-formed shardplate. My high spren mandate took the shape of a warhammer, which I slammed into Malata's shard blade. Because of the differences between her having sword and having hammer, her shard blade flew out of her hand. She screamed in pain as the vibrations of my hammer hitting her sword traveled through her arm throughout the rest of the body. I heard a sickening crunch of broken bones as her left arm was now laying limp because my hammer, after continued its arc and slammed into her arm. So she screamed in pain and then was limping away, but she fell. One of the fuse tried to attack me, but his sword merely slammed into the hilt of my warhammer. "How are you awake?" he roared in confusion. "Well, it's like this. I am a judge, and I will not be controlled by coercion, threats, blackmail, or intimidation. You and the rest of the fuse are trying to kill any human that you can, which is unjust. And you are working on committing genocide, which is unlawful. Finally, the worst of all, you are trying to harm our patients and the wounded, which is immoral. And all of those are crimes that I, as a Knight Radiant, but more importantly, as a Grand Judge of Alethkar, have never allowed and never will allow to happen. I have fought against injustice all my life, and do so as long as there is still air in my lungs and determination in my heart. I swung my hammer back into his chest, which broke through his chest and shattered his gem heart. The corpse fell to the ground, and then, oddly enough, a red stream from the actual fuse left the body to find another. Okay, that was weird. Then landed on the ground, an echo of Mandate. I'm sorry, Parchman. You should have lived a long, happy life, had friends, maybe even a family, and whatever else you liked. I am sorry for being forced to end your life. As a judge, I know you are not truly guilty of killing the victims that you did because your soul was replaced by someone else. But whatever afterlife you go to, you know this. It gave me no pleasure to end your life, and I'm sorry. You are as much of a victim as my kind is, but more, slightly more. I held out my hand, and Mandate transformed into a shovel. Well, my friend, are you ready to bury him? I heard his voice in my head say, yes. I took him to the valley far underneath Urithru. I found a great spot. I dug a hole and gently placed the body in it and recovered the body, and then said a prayer to the Almighty to watch over your spirit, to go to whatever your afterlife is. Then I used a surge of gravitation and rose into the air rapidly and flew into the tower again. I was talking to the fuse that was still alive. I swore to carry out the laws that I know are just. Your people and your God, the evil one that you call Odium, is wrong. The destruction and murder of humanity is unjust, but it was also unjust to enslave the Parshendi. But you and your God are enslaving them just as we were. And I have made sure to ban slavery, even on Parshmen, in my city that I lived in. I outlawed slavery throughout the entire city and several neighboring cities when I was judges. I then shattered the gem heart of the fused. Then a pair of hands rose from the floor and grabbed my ankles. Uh-oh. Mandate then transformed into a dagger as I quickly stabbed the hands grabbing me. Then the hands turned gray and another fused steps out of the ground. I see them draw their dark void light to repair their hands. While doing that, I stabbed Mandate into their chest, which broke her gem heart. Painsman crawled out of the ground when a red strand left her corpse. I flew to the oath gate and closed it. Then I reopened it to save the rest of the retreating Makabaki soldiers and civilians. A third fuse flew to where I was. Wow! I haven't fought a Skybreaker since the second to last desolation, and I'm so happy because you must be at least of the fourth ideal. Because I see you're covered in your shard plate and you have a shard blade. So, and something I know about you Windrunners is when you are of the fourth ideal, you have a personal mission. So, what is your personal mission, Skybreaker? Because I always try to ask my victims that. As I looked at him, well, fused. I have my personal mission is to enforce all laws that are just and moral and ethical. And currently, how the Herald Talonel is acting is unjust. Because, yes, the Parshendi are the original owners of this land, but they are not right in treating humans as badly as we have treated them. Then he reverse slashed himself and flew at me with his spren as a side sword. Yes! Well then, Skybreaker. We will fight! Ah! Meanwhile, at another part of the battlefield, Dirtus Wade aside, a 42-year-old windrunner, the second ideal, was rising to the air wall and floor, erratically flying to attack another fuse with his battle axe, which cut right into the chest of the Gemheart. The corpse tumbled through the air, suddenly standing to the ground. I yelled a whoop and crashed to accompanying Parshendi. Ha! He used the surge of gravitation to send two of them flying into the air. Meanwhile, inside the tower, hold on. The Makabaki 6th Cavalry Company ran through the Oath Gate, which was recently opened into Urithiru. They arrived through the Oath Gate platform, where the Dustbringer Malata had previously used the Oath Gate to let in an army of Fuse onto the platform. Half of the 6 had already entered Urithiru. The other half proceeded to dismount and begin fighting the Fused, as well as Malata. The Windrunner Gromox Cyrodiil rose into the air to battle one of the Regals, which were the Fuse that had powers similar to the Windrunners. So they could fly, they could use the surge of gravitation to also send enemies crashing into the ground, stuff like that. So, as I was fighting, my spren Kved took the shape of a lance. Ha! 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 This group of Fuse was part of a second wave. Meanwhile, the Queen inspired the Shardbearers and regular soldiers to keep up the offense. And the half of the Knight's Radiance that fell unconscious, she hid. Meanwhile, as Fuse and Parshendi hunt the power nodes, Urithiru began begging for help from the Queen. But something that shouldn't have happened. Clad in Stormblast, what Knight's Radiant, Windrunner, Bridgeman, Doctor, and Bodyguard was traveling around the tower, using his Fabrial glove. When the Fuse tried to destroy the nodes, the protections around them activated all of a sudden. And at one of them, just as the Fuse entered a room, several trapdoors opened up under their feet. And half of them fell instantly. Some of them caught themselves before they could fall. But that did delay us enough so that the entrance to the room is suddenly covered by a door that slid from above, locking into the ground. Something even worse happened, because this part of the tower, we heard a human voice in the air. "Hello, Gonchos!" We looked up and spotted a young female Unkalaki warrior. She was clad in dead shard plate, but unfortunately, she had a living shard blade in her hand. Next to her was a Herdazian man that was in the air. He smiled and looked down at the woman beside him. "Well, Gon, I bet these people have never fought a two-armed Herdazian and an Unkalaki Knight's Radiant duo. Ha 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 ha." His shard blade was currently a side sword, while her weapon was in its normal form of a shard blade. We then charged. "You might have fought humans before, but I bet you haven't fought a two-armed Herdazian! Ha ha!" but also, we were quickly being forced back from attacking the node by the Unkalaki warrior and the Windrunner that somehow was still alive, which is weird because there shouldn't be any currently conscious radiance. But in a different part of the tower, it was the non-radiant soldiers' offensive. One human soldier was almost killed by an arrow. Suddenly, a wall rose in front of him, blocking and shattering the arrow. He got up and began stringing an arrow to his bow. His partner removed a shield to block other arrows coming from the other side. The third member of their party was a spearman. All of our archers had one person with us that had a shield and sword. The spearman had a strange handle in his hand, and a case of what looked like darts at his waist, and a second one on his back. After I fired my arrow, he pulled a dart out of his lower case, attached it to the weird handle, stuck his head out a bit from the shield, stretched his arm back, and launched it forward, almost like he was throwing something. The dart launched forward almost a little faster than an arrow and slammed into the gem heart of a fused, not only piercing its chest, but going so deep into the chest, it pushed the gem heart right out of the body. Then it fell to the ground dead. Yes! Direct hit, demon! Storms! I love using my spear launcher. Meanwhile, the Makabaki reinforcements were charging to intercept the other tower node killer squads. It wasn't just arrows being launched at our enemies, but also the Makabaki darts. While Raboniel, the ancient fused, was working to destroy the shield around the main part of the tower, Kaladin had just killed the second body of the ancient fused named the Pursuer. But also during the charge, Drownhound Major was gutted by a spear and just died. Because, well, he's just a soldier. Kaladin then flew to one of the temporary outposts when he saw a group of archers and a squad of Makabaki soldiers with the strange darts on handles aimed at me. I landed on the ground. Please help me. I am very exhausted, and I need food and water. My name is Kaladin Stormblessed. I dropped to the ground, breathing heavily. Four of them, Makabaki, ran and gently picked me up. I then coughed. It's okay, sir. Even in Makabak, we've heard of the one and only Captain Kaladin Stormblessed, the slave turned Knights Radiant and bodyguard of King Dalinar the Blackthorn. Greg, get me my medical bag. Abalor, get one of our stretchers, then inform the nearest Fabrial communication hub that we need at least one additional squad of spearmen because of our honored guest. We then arrived back with the stretcher, which we brought into my medical tent, and we gave him his food and water. He made sure to slow down his speed of drinking, fortunately. So then, eventually I heard the squad of spearmen arrived. But something that us readers know is humans have a very nice tool that is not a weapon, but just as good. The flying barge Fabrial that was used to rescue the town of Hearthstone arrived and began filled with the unconscious Knights Radiants, as well as a company of soldiers to protect them. The Makabaki man Gadol, who was also reunited from his town by the recommendation of his city lord for skills as a hunter, wiped the sweat off his face and went to bathe. He wondered when he would finally progress to the second or third ideal. What he didn't know was that Peak's friend named Pebble had been watching his growing experience and skills and using his abilities for 7 months. He was curious about when I would finally say the second ideal, because I already passed it. Because I was able to say the second ideal, I just hadn't said it, because I thought I was still on the first ideal. So, and now it's a big time skip. 2 weeks later, we liberated Uritharu. I helped trap a horde of fused in the ground. We continued fighting the horde of Parshendian fused for 3.5 hours. Then we pushed them back to their staging ground. And that, my friends, as well as all my fantastic new watchers of my channel, was the end of the new Knights Radiant fanfiction. This was my longest one, so for those who watched it all the way through, I thank you. So, with that said, please like, comment, and subscribe, because I really enjoy seeing your liking my videos, as well as your comments. It just made me feel happy that you enjoyed listening to the stories as much as I like reading them. Well, with that said, have a good day, and I hope you enjoy whatever video I post next. Bye.